we're so conditioned through TikTok and social media to just think, hey, I can just, I can do these, I can press these 5 buttons and then the person that I want to be is going to pop out on the other end. And at the end of the day, it's like just this slow, monotonous grind of like just getting real dopamine hits. And I feel like that kind of perfectly encapsulates your story. And that's really what we took from being on the podcast, because, everything that we're doing in Meat Mafia and trying to teach to people, it's this slow, monotonous process for ourselves too. Like just deciding to say, hey, I'm going to quit this, high paying corporate job where I'm 26, making $200,000 a year to make no money to start this podcast and build this business. That's really like a force of will and just an inkling of a belief that we have in ourselves, man. It's like, it's not an easy thing, but it's a worthwhile thing.
An entrepreneur straight out of New York City, Michael Chernow. What's cracking?
What up? Welcome back to the Creatures of Habit Podcast. I am sitting across the table from a guy that I've been trying to get on the podcast for a while. I was actually on his podcast when I was down in Austin. His name is Brett Ender. He is the co-host of the Meat Mafia, which is a top 25 podcast in the world of nutrition. He's also the co-founder of Noble Origins, which is a very interesting protein company. It is a nose-to-tail protein company, so it's not whey protein. It is an animal protein company. They use beef protein. It's actually the beef. Like, where's the beef? It's in Noble. And so it's got beef protein, it's got colostrum in it, it's got collagen in it, probably a couple of other things that I'm missing, but it's a really, really cool and interesting animal protein product that I'm excited. I haven't tried it yet. I'm excited to try it. But I really want to talk to Brett because he launched a podcast really sort of in the face of, the healthcare food system in this country being all sorts of bleeped up. And he was going through some autoimmune stuff that he ended up really sort of maybe not curing, but really getting a hold of through what he put into his body nutritionally. And so he wanted to sort of take his mission of, hey, what we eat is ultimately going to dictate how we feel and our health. And that's what they're doing with the Meat Mafia. So I'm excited to have Brett on the show. My brother, what up?
My man, so good to see you.
You too.
I'm from the Northeast, so my parents still live in Jersey. It's where I'm from. So every time I come back home, you're one of the first guys that's always top of mind. So I'm so glad I got to come into the city and do this podcast.
Awesome, dude. I didn't know that you were from Jersey.
Yeah, so born and raised in Princeton, and then I worked and lived in Manhattan in the Upper East Side for like 5 years.
Cool. Where on the Upper East?
I was 59th and 2nd.
Okay. I grew up on 87th between 1st and 2nd.
Okay, so not too far.
No.
And when I was in the city, before you and I ever knew each other, dude, I used to go to the meatball shop all the time with my friends. Unbelievable spot. So it's just a very, very cool full circle moment of like us being in the city, both doing different things, having transition into different careers. It's very, very cool.
I want to talk to you about the Meat Mafia podcast. I heard of the podcast obviously before I went on the podcast. I pay attention to podcasts. You guys have built like a pretty big podcast in not that long a time. What do you think it is about the Meat Mafia? Do you think it's the name that stops people from scrolling? Do you think it's the premise of the podcast? What do you think it is about Meat Mafia that, gets people excited?
Yeah, and dude, we had you were such an amazing guest, and Harry and I you were one of those guests on our hit list that we wanted to have on for a while, just because from afar, right? You never know who you're impacting. So Harry and I had come across your content, and we just really admire the way that you talked about habit formation and the way you carried yourself as a husband, a dad, the way you stayed in shape. It was an amazing episode. I think it was episode 256, which was in December. So if anyone hasn't listened to that episode with Michael, definitely check that episode out, because I think we we dug into a lot of really cool topics, especially those rules that you have with your son. That was a really special clip that went super viral too. But I think the name is definitely polarizing. And then I also think that because I co-host it with Harry, who's my best friend that I played college baseball with, and the fact that we're both younger guys talking about the health space, there really aren't that many younger people in like the millennial demographic that are kind of dissecting the issues of what's gone wrong with the food system. And I think a lot of people just assume, oh, you're in your 20s, therefore you must be healthy. And we found that to not really be the case, because I played college baseball up in the Northeast, and going into my senior year of college, I ended up getting diagnosed with some really bad gut issues and autoimmune stuff. I know you'd mentioned you had Lyme's disease. I had ulcerative colitis, which really just led me down this whole rabbit hole of basically everything we're taught about the food system is incorrect, and most of us are poisoning ourselves unintentionally, whether we realize it or not. And that was the whole premise of the Meat Mafia. Is it's a very heart and soul driven podcast where we're not the experts. We come off as like the informed consumer, and we just want to interview experts and just try and distill as much good information and just pump that out into the world. And that's really what we feel like the world needs right now.
I think that's a great segue into the first kind of question I have for you. Based on your extensive interviewing, I mean, you've interviewed how many people at this point?
300 plus.
300 plus people, predominantly in the sort of expert food arena. What have you extrapolated as like the top 3, top 5 sort of either A, misnomers about the food system, or B, this is what you should be eating? And I know that, it's not a one size fits all for everyone, but I would argue to say that there are sort of common threads and common denominators within the people that you've interviewed.
Yes.
To sort of extrapolate like hey, this would probably be something to consider based on the amount of people that have mentioned it.
Yeah. I would say one of the things that comes to mind that surprised me, but a common thread is we've had so many guests on that have gotten diagnosed with quote unquote incurable diseases that were kind of on the medical merry-go-round, going from doctor to doctor, medication to medication, told that they would sit with these diseases for the rest of their lives, whether it was type 2 diabetes, different types of autoimmune disease, they had strokes, et cetera. They gravitated towards like diet and lifestyle levers, like actually correcting, like at the root cause, what are the single ingredient real foods that I should be eating? And they followed those different types of diets for extended period of times. And they were able to actually cure something that they were told was ultimately incurable. So I think that's the first thread, is just how transformative the body really is. And sometimes you do have to take on that hat of, I am the CEO of my own health. I'm not just going to blanket listen to what my doctors are telling me, especially if you're not necessarily getting those answers from Western medicine. Like a lot of times you do have to think outside the box. I mean, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but if I just listened to what my doctors were telling me, I'd still be on drugs and medication that cost literally $400,000 per year. I got off of all those medications entirely. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that we really don't know what to eat, right? We're the only species in nature that debates the right and appropriate foods we should be eating. And the statistic that I always come back to is that 63% of all calories consumed in the US come in the form of ultra-processed foods, which is so crazy. Like think about everything you eat. Say you're on a 3,000 calorie a day diet. 63% of all those calories come from ultra-processed foods that are artificially injected with, vegetable oils, sugars, refined grains, et cetera. It's pretty mind-boggling to think about that. It's such a far cry from where we were at a few generations ago. And then I think the third thing is, with the name Meat Mafia Podcast, we really do feel that red meat is a scapegoat, and it's probably a scapegoat for a number of different reasons. It's red, it's delicious, it's powerful, it requires death in order to actually produce it too. And when you look at the food system in general, it's a very easy product to demonize, and there's a lot of misconceptions around what it does to the environment, what it does to your health. And we really, as a society, we blame red meat for a lot of the chronic disease that we currently experience. And a statistic that Harry and I come back to on the show is that not only are we not eating that much red meat, the average American only consumes 2 ounces of red meat per day. Yet 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. So what we found is that it's really hard to believe that red meat is causing this epidemic of chronic disease when we're barely eating it as a society. And the more that I've gravitated towards good quality red meat, a lot of our guests, a lot of the people that we've interviewed and learned from, we've discovered that it's one of the healthiest foods that you can be eating. And we actually believe it's possible to cure a lot of those chronic diseases by gravitating towards animal products that God has ultimately created.
It's interesting. So right before we started recording, we were talking about one of my favorite snacks, Maui Nui venison. And for me, it was like when I got introduced to those guys, I was like, oh my God, this is a no-brainer. Like, I'm a hunter. I love hunting. And some people want to crucify me for that. Yeah. I could care less what you want to do. I mean, it is one of my, I just truly love the hunting journey. But venison is arguably some of the cleanest, if not the cleanest, most healthy animal protein in the game. It's super duper lean. It's wild. It's delicious. And we used to eat probably way more of it than we do now.
Definitely.
Right? Like way more of it because we used to hunt and gather. And now I think less than 5% of the American population hunts, and if not even less than that. Like in my area where I hunt in upstate New York, they're trying to recruit hunters every season because there's just there's just not enough of it. And so I believe you, and I also am a massive advocate for the right red meat, right? I think there is a difference, you know what I mean? Like eating the right red meat is, for me, my wife will also like sort of like break my chops because I eat red meat 4-5 days a week between venison, bison, and beef. It just makes me feel really good.
Yeah.
I feel really, really good on red meat. I do my blood work every 3 months. My cholesterol is like 170. Like everything is in check for the most part. And it's a massive part of my diet protocol. It's like what I eat, it's like what I go to on a regular basis now. And again, like this is probably, probably people that listen to this podcast will comment on like, oh yeah, how's it feel to be privileged? You know what I mean? Because that's what I get all the time when I say something that I like to do that might not be like super duper accessible. But yeah, I choose to eat grass-fed, grass-finished beef when I go to the store. That's what I look for. That's what I buy. And I do think that like there probably is a difference between that and sort of like the industrial style beef that is grown in the country.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I mean, you just had so many good nuggets in what you just said, where the hunters that we've interviewed and the hunters that I've become friends with in Austin, Texas, which is where I live now, they're the biggest conservationist and environmental friendly people that I possibly know. Like, think about something that could be better for you, your family, or the environment than hunting an animal that's out in nature, that's wild, it has all the nutrients of being wild. It's not confined to this industrial feedlot, like you just mentioned, killing that animal in the most humane way, which I know sounds counterintuitive to kill something, yet love it and also in a humane way, and then stock your entire freezer with that meat and be living off of that meat that you actually hunted too. I think a lot of the misconceptions around meat just stem from the fact that I don't think people have taken the effort to go out and meet their local farmer and shake their hand and take a look at their operation and see the way that the cows are grazing on pasture and they're low stress. And then the farmer is ultimately like using a very energy intensive practice to raise that meat humanely. And then you as the consumer are making that choice to not go to a grocery store, to not buy, industrial conventional meat and actually give your hard-earned dollar to that farmer. It's kind of like this sacred exchange that we've gotten away from. I'm sure with you and your family living up in Hudson Valley, there's so many good farmers out there. So 99% of Americans have never met their local farmer. Like back in the day, it wasn't conventional supermarkets. It was typically a farmer per town or even per county. And you were sourcing the majority of your single ingredient products from those farmers too. So we've kind of come a far cry away from what things used to be. And I think it's strange for humans to think maybe we actually had it figured out like 200 or 100 years ago, because we think about evolution in terms of technology where it's this constant progression. But I actually think the secret to our food system is really just learning from the past when it was on a more localized system and you could trust the farmer and shake their hand and ask them all the questions that you would typically have. You really can't do that at a supermarket for the most part.
I mean, dude, I've been having so many conversations over the last couple of months because I feel it in my core that like we are headed the wrong direction as a people. And I have no problem throwing my flag in the ground on that.
Definitely.
I would do not anything, but I would definitely appreciate not having a cell phone. Like really would appreciate not having a cell phone, not having to participate in social media all the time, even though it's a big part of my business, and everything that comes with that is about our health. Like
yes.
Every single thing, like where we are as a community, how we've dehumanized communicating, connection, is the same exact thing that's happening with what we're putting into our body, right? It's just like, let's make it easier. Let's make it faster. Let's make it ridiculously delicious. Let's, like no suffering whatsoever, like, and I do believe that that's why there are these renegades out there that are like, Yeah, I'm going to go run 100 miles. Yeah, I'm going to go sit in a freezing cold ice bath for 10 minutes. Yeah, I'm going to go, sit in a 220 degree sauna, because we actually, in a weird way, need suffering as a people.
Yes.
And we have come so far from that. Like any philosopher, any sort of like religious leader, like, will always say that there has to be a level of suffering to appreciate life. I was watching a Patagonia documentary, and the founder of Patagonia said, pain is the rent we pay for living. When I heard that, I was like, yes, like I believe that. I really do. Like we were just on vacation in Cape Cod with my whole family, and none of my kids don't get an iPhone. They get an iPad if we go on a long train ride, like a long plane trip or a long road trip. We had to drive 5 hours to Cape Cod, so the kids got their iPad. And my God, man, like trying to rip that thing out of their hands when we got there was like, it was like a massive flag just went up and said, dude, you cannot do this you can't give this to these people. Like these little brains, they are immediately hooked. Like, what the fuck is it going to look like in 20 years? Where are we going?
I know.
What is happening?
I know. And your story, I mean, the funny thing too is like your brand, Creatures of Habit, you told your whole story so well on your podcast, but like, I think the reason why you're so relatable and why it's such a profound story is that there was so much pain associated with that process to like become the version of Michael now that people look up to, and the version of Michael that you're proud of and your wife is proud of and your kids are proud of. Like, dude, like it was like the dopamine hits that you had to go from to become who you were, just like that monotonous grind of like, I'm going to eat this healthy breakfast, I'm going to go on this walk, I'm going to start doing martial arts, and just those consistent reps that you did for years to ultimately transform into the person that you are now. It's like we're so conditioned through TikTok and social media to just think, hey, I can just, I can do these, I can press these 5 buttons and then the person that I want to be is going to pop out on the other end. And at the end of the day, it's like just this slow, monotonous grind of like just getting real dopamine hits. And I feel like that kind of perfectly encapsulates your story. And that's really what we took from being on the podcast, because, everything that we're doing in Meat Mafia and trying to teach to people, it's this slow, monotonous process for ourselves too. Like just deciding to say, hey, I'm going to quit this, high paying corporate job where I'm 26, making $200,000 a year to make no money to start this podcast and build this business. That's really like a force of will and just an inkling of a belief that we have in ourselves, man. It's like, it's not an easy thing, but it's a worthwhile thing. And, I feel a lot for your boys in this younger generation. And I do think that there's a path where we can condition them to go from these cheap dopamine hits to like real dopamine that comes from actually like gathering life experiences and eating good foods and sitting around the dinner table and connecting with your parents and your loved ones. Like, I totally think that future is 100% possible. It's just going to take some intentionality and work. And it starts with having conversations like this.
Yes, I agree with you. And I really do also, I'm not one of these people that think, it's impossible to turn the Titanic, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's hard, very, very hard. But what really matters is not about what other people are doing.
Yeah.
It matters what you do, right? And I know technology is just, it's destroying, in my opinion, and we're sitting here with cameras and lights and
totally.
Microphones. But at the end of the day, man, I really just, and when we talk about the food system, what's happened in the last 7,500 years is so new in comparison to how long our beings have been standing on 2 feet, right?
Yeah.
We're talking 1 million years.
Yeah.
And the last 100, less than 1% of that period of time, like 1/1,000,000th of a percent, we've introduced this stuff.
Yes.
It can't be good. So anybody that's listening can and I'm not talking about only technology, I'm talking about really what you're putting into your body. And, we were designed to move. We were designed to walk. We were designed to run. We were designed to lift. We were designed to push. We were designed to pull. We were designed to jump. We were designed to be outside. Like, that's what we were, like, God made us to do those things, right? Like, that is who we are as beings. And we have literally shut the door on that.
Yeah.
Like, shut the door. 9 out of 10 people spend 85 to 90% of their day indoors. They're sleeping for 8 hours maybe, and they're working inside most of the time. And, you know, maybe they get an hour in the front end, an hour in the back end of that work time if they're lucky. But the majority of the people are spending, you know, 18 hours indoors, 15, 18 hours indoors. And that's just not what we were designed to do. So like we are really concerned as a nation, the United States, about our healthcare and about health in general. And like if we just opened our eyes to like what we're doing, in my opinion, things would change. Be outside more, move your body more, do some resistance training, eat healthy shit, right? Mm-hmm. Be mindful about what you put into your body. We just went off on a tangent, but I think it's important to talk about.
It's an important tangent.
Yeah. Let's talk about some habits that you use on a daily basis, some stuff that you do maybe in the morning. What does a morning routine look like for you?
So I wish I had the 30-step morning routine the ideal day. For me, what I've learned is that I think a lot about what you said before with technology. And even for myself, sometimes like a very humbling thing for me to do is sometimes just to look at the time on my screen score, because especially when you have a business that's built on social media, it's so easy to subconsciously be on your phone and just say to yourself, well, my business is on social media, so I'm being productive. And then when I really look at myself in the mirror, there are a lot of times where I'm like, dude, you're not creating, you're just mindlessly consuming. And sometimes that phone score will be like 3 to 4 hours a day of like nothing productive for the business at all. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's all about just how do I maximize time? Like you seem like you have a really good understanding of, you know, how fast time goes and how precious time is. And especially when you're trying to build out a business from scratch, like maximizing every second of the day and squeezing the juice out of that lemon is so important. So for me, the biggest thing that I've learned, the busier that I've gotten, and you know, I'm not married, I don't have kids, but for me, it's just if I can get up without checking my phone first thing in the morning, say a quick prayer, do a 20-minute meditation. I have this guided Bob Proctor meditation that I've listened to for 2 years that works really well for me.
What is it?
It's a Bob. Do you know Bob Proctor? He was big into like the documentary The Secret and manifestation and things like. He was kind of one of the original self-help guys.
Okay, Bob Proctor.
Bob Proctor.
Okay, we'll hit that in the show notes.
He died like 2 years ago, but unbelievable guy. He was very influenced by Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich. And he has this great abundance meditation that it literally takes 20 minutes. Like I'll shower, I'll brush my teeth, and then I'll just play that on YouTube while I'm in bed. And then I'll pray before that. I'll listen to the meditation, and then I'll get my ass to the gym as quickly as possible. And for me, I've been loving the Founders Podcast recently by David Senra. He does a biography a week of a different founder throughout history. So he goes as far back as like Julius Caesar and Jesus Christ, and then as modern as Steve Jobs. And I think the cool thing about that, especially if you're in the process of trying to build something out from scratch, reading biographies on founders is so important because you actually learned about the principles of these great men and women that really shaped society and had an impact. Because there are a lot of really, really popular business books, but sometimes I wonder, did this person just get popular because they wrote this book? Are these principles actually true? Where when you're studying something about a founder, it's like, no, these people actually impacted society, so I should be learning from the things that they did. So I'll typically I'm trying to do a mile every single day through the end of 2024 because I'm really just trying to focus on consistency. So I'll do like 1 to 5 miles on the treadmill at the gym that I go to in Austin, Squatch, which is where we recorded our podcast. Sometimes I'll do it outside, but I just love the monotony of running on the treadmill and just kind of like sweating all over on the treadmill.
Rare man right there.
I know.
Rare.
Little masochism. So I'll do the cardio while I listen to the Founders Podcast. And then I'll do like a 45-minute lift, shower, and then I'm right off to the office. And so how I've structured my life is that my house is 2 minutes from the office that we have, and then it's also like 2 minutes from the gym. So everything is within like a 2-mile radius of each other just to try and cut down on commute time as much as possible. It's kind of like this nice little logistical triangle. But for my morning routine, it's like anything I can do to just avoid distraction, because for me, even if I'm scrolling for the first 10 minutes of my day, very seldom is it 10 minutes, it'll become like 30 minutes. And I immediately just get into that comparison loop where if I can just start to do something that's actually nourishing for me, that feels like it's an input, who I am as a person the rest of my day is completely different people. Like I'll attack my sales calls, I'll be a better leader to my team, be just a better person in general. So it's prayer, the guided meditation, cardio, Founders Podcast, lift, shower, and then I'm good.
That sounds like a pretty epic morning routine. I like that. I'm always looking for a new guided meditation. I've used so many different. I used Headspace forever. I did the full 365 Headspace journey 2 years ago. And I've used there's another
Sam Harris?
Sam Harris's app, which I also really loved, although sometimes it would get a little too like separate your head from your body. Like it was a little bit, I was like, all right, maybe this one isn't for me. But Bob Proctor, I'm going to check that one out. I've been, manifestation has been something that I have dabbled on and off with. And for about 6 months, I was doing my own sort of manifestation meditation, and I built this like beautiful home in this manifestation, and it's a really comforting, calm like thing. So I'm interested in the Bob Proctor. For business for you, is your main priority, or is it just like sort of, do they go hand in hand, Meat Mafia and Noble Origins?
There's 3 legs of the stool, which is actually, I think this is going to be helpful for new founders or someone that's kind of in that corporate loop and they've been consuming and they're really like dying to actually create something that's tangible. That's really how I felt a few years ago. I graduated from Babson College, which is an entrepreneurial school up in Boston. It's one of the few business schools that has a program dedicated towards entrepreneurship.
I have a couple of friends that went there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, small school in Boston, great school, loved it up there. But when I graduated, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And what's interesting is that even though it's an entrepreneurial school, 90% of all the kids that I graduated with, they just go work corporate jobs in consulting, investment banking.
Why is that?
It's such a good question. I think that even though it's an entrepreneurial school, they're still just teaching you kind of like standardized classes. They're not really giving you that kick in the ass to start something. And I think when you're graduating, you still, I think there's value in actually working a corporate job also to learn the things that you don't want and learn certain business skill sets. I think there's a few select people that at a really young age, they understand like what is my God-given mission that I want to turn into a business. But I think for 99% of 21-year-olds, that just you kind of got to get kicked in the teeth by the world a little bit before you ultimately figure that out. And I think I fell into that category. I worked a couple different tech sales jobs. I worked a consulting gig, and I would always pray to God for the characteristics that I wanted to embody as a man. I would never pray like, hey, I want to make $1 million or do really well in my job. But the one thing I would pray for is, please just show me the thing that I'm ultimately supposed to be doing, because I know you have great plans for me. I know I'm supposed to be doing something more than this job. I just don't know what that is. And what's funny is that it was actually kind of hitting me in the face the whole time. I just didn't actually acute my vision to realize what that was. And what it ultimately was something centered around food and nutrition and trying to help educate people to be healthier. I know I hinted at my story earlier, but going into my senior year of college, I got really sick with an autoimmune disease called ulcerative colitis. So basically what happens is your large intestine, your colon, gets severe inflammation on it. It kind of metastasizes in the form of these like bloody ulcers. So you're just shitting blood constantly and you can't take in any food. And here I am, I'm 21. I thought I was a healthy kid. I was formerly a Division I athlete, was playing Division III baseball when I transferred, but was binge drinking all the time, stressed out, staring at my phone all the time, not sleeping well, and ended up getting sick with this disease my senior year. Immediately got put on super expensive drugs and medications. Again, $400,000 a year on these biologic drugs and oral steroids and prednisone. And the doctors are like, look, this is your future. You're going to have to be on these drugs for the rest of your life. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, is it possible to heal the body? Could there be something that's more holistic that they're not telling me? Flash forward to 2019, I was living in the city, working this job, and the carnivore diet started to get more popularized. And now the carnivore diet is more accepted, but in 2019, people thought you were out of your mind for eating all meat. But the more research I was doing, I started learning more about how so much disease is really triggered from this excess of inflammation that a lot of processed foods and honestly the standard American lifestyle really causes. So I followed this diet like consistently for 2 years, where I ate steak, ground beef, bison, eggs, fish, chicken, cooked in olive oil, beef tallow, ghee, and just really gravitated towards those animal products. And the more
veggies at all. No fruit.
No veggies and fruit in the beginning. I was really, really strict. And the rationale is that when you're really strict autoimmune and you don't have any permeability in your gut, you really want to stick to like the most bioavailable products, which are animal products according to this diet.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get that inflammation out of your body, you can start to introduce fruits, vegetables, dairy, things like that. So now I eat all different types of food groups. But at the time I was so sick that I just stuck to those foods. And it worked incredibly well, dude. Like within the first few weeks, my stomach got better, my skin got healthier, my mood got better. I never really struggled with depression or anxiety, but my quality of thought got better. And you start to develop this amazing intuitiveness in your body where you really understand what it wants and what it doesn't want. And so I was getting healthier and healthier, but I was still working this job. And I was it all leads back to what I was supposed to be doing, because my coworkers thought I was out of my mind, because I was working at this very liberal tech company where engineers are, they're drinking Mountain Dew and eating pizza for lunch. And here I am, I've got my glass Tupperware container of ribeye and ground beef and stuff like that. And they thought I was crazy. But I was finding that when people would ask me questions about the diet, or they would see what I was doing and see that I was getting healthier and want to learn, I would stop whatever I was doing and write them up a meal plan or a grocery shopping list or send them podcasts and things like that. And so looking back on it in reverse, I'm like, all right, well, typically the things that you're willing to do for free are probably the things that you should ultimately be doing with your life. And so I do this diet. I get off all the drugs and medication I'm taking.
Like how long after you started the carnivore diet did you start to add in other food groups?
6 months.
Of just meat and
just
eggs?
Meat, yeah, just meat, eggs.
Any kind of meat, fish, chicken?
Yeah, like what they say is a lot of people that are big in the carnivore diet push you towards red meat because of the nutrient density.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is that I think all meat is good if it's sourced from a good quality source, and you should really do what you enjoy eating. So if you hate salmon, don't eat a lot of salmon. If you don't like beef, there are great sources of chicken, pork, fish that you can be eating too. But luckily I love steak. I love ground beef. I was cooking 2 steaks a day, like loving my life and enjoying every
Is that basically what, like how, like talk us through a meal, through like a dinner.
Like a strict carnivore diet? Yeah, so I'll eat 2 meals a day. Sometimes in the morning I'll do coffee with a little bit of like raw heavy cream. It's got a bunch of saturated fat in it, and then I'm pretty fat adapted.
Can you have that on the traditional carnivore?
They say that you should. Some people say stay away from coffee. Some people say if it doesn't bother your gut, leave it in. My stomach did really well with carnivore. So again, like that intuitiveness.
But the heavy cream.
You can leave that in with dairy. Some people are so sensitive that they can't tolerate dairy at all. Mm-hmm. The good thing about cream is that it's very low in sugar. The lactose content is a lot lower. So for a lot of people, it actually will sit fairly well in your stomach. So I'll throw a pinch of heavy cream in. And then because I'm fairly fat adapted, I don't really feel a need to eat until like 12 or 1 o'clock. But I listen to my body too. If I want to eat, I'll throw in a couple eggs and bacon and some fruit and things like that now. But for a lot of times for lunch, I'm eating around like a pound of meat, ground beef, steak, chicken thighs, something that's fattier. And then for dinner, it's, ribeye with I'll throw some blue cheese crust on top of there, some balsamic vinegar, some pickled vegetables, and I just keep it really simple.
So you're not married, you don't have kids. So it's a little bit easier to sort of stick to this way of eating.
Totally.
So, but have you been sort of like borderline carnivore for the last 5 years?
Yeah, for the last 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So no refined, like no sugar whatsoever.
I would say 99% of my meals don't have refined sugar.
Yeah.
But I also
do you ever cheat and have like
100%?
Okay. Like you'll eat ice cream on a.
Yes, because life is meant to be enjoyed, as you know, and I do think that outside of religion, dieting like falls in that same camp where people are so tribal about it. And for me, it's always come back to, I know the foods that make me feel really good. And I do believe, obviously, there are a lot of standard American inputs that are toxic to the body, but the body is also really resilient. And the purpose of health is to have a resilient body so that, say you and I want to go to John's Obliquer after we record this podcast, I can have some pizza that I enjoy with a great friend and feel great about that meal. And then tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do my morning routine. I'm going to do my cardio, and then I'm going to get back on track too. It's like there's a lot of morality around the foods that we eat, where I just think that if you have a great blueprint of things that you love to follow and can stay consistent to, like, yeah, man, have some ice cream, have some pizza, Don't be the guy at your kid's birthday party that's not going to have a slice of your kid's birthday cake. Like,
I mean, the one thing I always say is the only thing we need to do perfectly is get back up.
yes.
Like, I say that all the time, because I truly do believe that is it, right? Like, you spend a weekend going for it. Monday comes around, you just get back on the horse,
Totally.
right? Like, it's all good. It's all good. I'm really interested in that. I tried Carnivore for, I think, a month, and if I'm being honest, I don't really remember what it was like because it was probably like 2-ish years ago, maybe. But I'm interested in trying it again.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to see and actually committing to it. I probably wouldn't go like strict. I'd probably have some fruit. I mean, I'm like such a fruit and vegetables guy. I love fruit and vegetables.
I love it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, people misconstrue our name a lot because it's called the Meat Mafia, that we just eat meat 100% of the time, 24/7. And my whole story is more so just maybe there is a path outside of what Western medicine is telling you that could potentially help you get the results. Like I think Carnivore is an amazing tool for anyone that wants to take a period of time, maybe that's a week, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's 30 days, maybe it's longer, and just really control the foods that you're eating and like control every single input that you're putting into your body, and just gaining amazing awareness of what foods make me feel good versus foods that don't make me feel good. And then once you gather all the alpha that you need from that experiment, like start incorporating other things back into your diet. There's certain people like a Jordan Peterson or a Michaela Peterson where they're so sick that they have to stay on that diet for the rest of their lives. But there are a lot of other people like me where I can eat pizza and I can have some alcohol and have some ice cream and I'm completely fine. And that's the amazing thing about the human body, is that we're all different, but if you don't experiment, you're never going to really figure out what that limit is and what playbook works the best for you.
Who really sort of crafted or coined Carnivore?
It's probably Sean Baker. Dr. Sean Baker. I don't know if you're familiar with his work at all. He's probably the most popular carnivore diet practitioner. So he was he's an emergency surgeon, and he was a Army veteran, high-level rugby player. He's jacked too. He's like 6'6", 240, in incredible shape in his mid-50s, deadlifting like 600 pounds and things like that. And he experimented with paleo, keto. And then I think the more research he was doing, he had come across this concept of an all-meat diet. And he was just finding anecdotally, when I pulled out some of these other foods and just gravitated towards animal products, he felt really good and was getting lean and his biomarkers were improving. And so he really started spearheading that. And then he started working with a lot of patients that were severe autoimmune, and especially with autoimmunity, with the inflammation that you deal with, when you cut out a lot of these processed additives and sugar, the body is able to really repair itself and get a lot of that inflammation out. So it's very controversial, but what it comes down to for me is that when you walk in the airport and you can count them on your finger, when 7 out of 10 people are unhealthy around you, it's probably going to take an uncommon practice or just mindset to get out of the metabolic health crisis that we're currently in.
The stats are like catastrophic in this country.
Yeah.
It's not the same everywhere, but in this country, it's bad.
Definitely. 16% of US GDP goes towards healthcare related costs. So it's like, why even fight a war when you can just eat yourself to death? You know what I mean? It's pretty incredible. Even just the cost of insulin for type 2 diabetes, which is largely preventable by introducing a low carbohydrate diet. We've had tons of doctors on, endocrinologists, that take patients with type 2 diabetes, put them on a low carbohydrate diet, and they literally get off their insulin. So you just think about what are the macro level effects of this mindset and this diet being applied to a broader scale. But unfortunately in Western medicine, it's like the average doctor receives less than 24 hours of nutritional training. They're taught to be highly specialized, and it's really just not the current model. But what's encouraging to me is what you said earlier, where it's like there's very few things in life that we do have control over, but I do think we have control over our thoughts or the way that we respond to our thoughts, and we do have control over every single bite of food that goes into our body, which is encouraging to me.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, not everybody has control over that, but we do have control over a percentage of those bites of food, right? And like if the percentage of those bites of food are chosen wisely, if the percentage that we do have control over are chosen wisely, then we will be in a better place. I think what we're I think that there is an enormous amount of people that live here in this country, right? And every single one of them needs some level of healthcare. every single one of us is going to need healthcare at certain points in our lives. So you have a lot of people and not a lot of doctors, right? So it's like, and the systems are just not, they haven't evolved enough to handle all of this volume, right? And so it's when you really think about like short-term gratification versus long-term gratification, right? We know which one is the right one every time, right? You know that like taking a bite of that pizza might make you feel good, or taking a bite of that donut or whatever it is that you're like, man, fuck it. Like you're going to feel great. You take that bite. It's delicious. Your taste buds are going nuts. The serotonin or dopamine's like rushing. And then 7 minutes later, it's like, I want another one. And oh man, I want another one. Oh man, I'm not feeling as good as I did when I took that bite, you know? Whereas like the sort of longer term, sort of more marathon plays that might not feel great that moment down the road will ultimately be what saves your life.
Yeah.
And we are, as I think also like the way we're wired, specifically with this sort of hyper technological stimulation that we're experiencing, like we're wired these days to like want. And you know, the one thing that I will say, which is really interesting, is like what sort of triggers that like that dopamine hit for me in a very real way today is fitness.
Yeah.
Fitness is something that we're like, I crave it. Like I genuinely crave it. I actually am one of these guys that really loves doing it. Like I love doing it. I cannot wait to go and train and work out. And I feel so lucky to be one of those people, because I know a lot of people struggle with that, and I have empathy for the people that struggle with getting to the gym. But one thing that I would say to anybody listening who is one of those people that struggle with that, sort of putting on the running sneakers, going to the gym, like 21 days. You know, they used to say 21 days to develop any habit. I've kind of come to the conclusion that it probably does take 90 days to truly develop like a consistent habit. But 21 days of going to the gym will be enough time for you. And that I'm not saying 21 days straight. I'm saying like take a month and go to the gym 4 days a week, 5 days a week. You know what I mean? And in that 4-week period of time, you will definitely 100% feel better than before you started. And that feeling better will ultimately contribute to your desire to want to go.
Definitely.
And I don't know anybody who has truly started a journey in fitness and regretted it. I don't know anyone. Speaking of people like you, where you're deeply passionate about the well-being of humans, I am too. I have a business around it. You've got a business around it. I've got a podcast about it. You've got a podcast about it. I really, and I've also taken a lot of shit for saying things like this, like, it's not that difficult to change, right? It's literally, there's 3 or 4 pillars. Being mindful about what you do when you start your day. Being mindful about the things that you put into your body. Being mindful about how you move your body. And being mindful about the people that you love and the people you surround yourself with. And then lastly, being mindful about what time you choose to close your eyes. And like, those 5 things, in my opinion, will change your life.
Yeah. I think the reason why people like you are so important, I think guys like you just prove how malleable humans really are. Like I think about, there's that image of, I think the top part of the image is like the statue of David sculpted. And then the bottom half of the image is like this morbidly obese person. And that image basically implies that like you truly do have control over the way that you want to sculpt that piece of marble in your own life. And so when you were telling your story on the podcast, just thinking about where you were in your early 20s, and it was like this gust of wind in the right direction where you just decided to change your life. And so much of the person that you are now, the restaurants that you've started, the podcasts you have, the brands that you have now, it's like, it's all built on the back of you just choosing to make that change. And so that's why I think there's a lot of impact when you say these words, because it's, you know, where does the motivation come from when you're 50 pounds overweight and you've been eating like shit for years and you don't really know where to start? It's like, I don't know, it's like this intangible belief and this faith. And sometimes I think about if you knew when you were like sleeping on that floor of your mattress, like know where to start, and you had just started doing your walks and eating the oatmeal and having the salad, like, could you imagine if you knew where you were going to be now, right? If you had that that blueprint, if you could see where you were going to be 15 years later, like, of course you would have stuck on that path, but most people don't take the time to think about who they could potentially become and think about compounding all those reps. So I know that was a lot of word vomit in what I just said, but I just think your story is so important. And I've always been drawn to guys like you that prove how malleable we really are. And if you can do it and I can do it, there's no reason why someone else listening to this podcast can't do it too.
Thank you so much for saying that, man. It really does mean a lot. I really appreciate that. And you're right. Like this time right now, 20 years ago, was the worst of the worst for me in my life. I said 2017 was like one of the roughest times of my life. I can honestly sit here across the table from you right now and say, like, I am living my best life without a question of a doubt. Like, I'm sure it's going to get better and better, but I'm like, I've got nothing to complain about at this very moment. I couldn't think of something to complain about, truly. Outside of like, I'd love to be 6'3", but aside from that, you know what I mean? Like, no help there. The one thing that I will say, to just put a button on what you said, is like, thinking about the future, I think, is intelligent unless it stresses you out. What I've learned, and the way I've like sort of, I don't want to say conformed, but arguably is conformed, because the guys that really took me under their wing told me that this is what I needed to do. And I was certainly not like stoked about it when they told me that, but like, so I did have to conform to the lifestyle that I live today, which is ultimately the best way I think life should be lived, which is one day at a time. Because, and I know that that's a sober community thing. They obviously say one day at a time, but I have one day at a time tattooed on my arm, or I have one at a time tattooed on my arm, because I really do believe that like we will do our best work if we can focus on right here, right now.
Yeah.
And if we worry about the future, or are stressed out, or beating ourselves up about what happened yesterday, the chances of us crushing and succeeding and putting numbers up on the board right here, right now, today, are just mitigated. Mm-hmm. If you can really wake up in the morning and say to yourself with a smile on your goddamn face, today's my day. Every day, over and over and over again, today's my day. And whether or not that day is going to be your day or not, setting yourself up for success like that is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, today is the day. Today is the day. Everything happens now. Doesn't happen tomorrow. Doesn't happen yesterday. It's already happened. So what's happening in your life is happening. You and I are here together. We're having a great conversation. Mm-hmm. I've loved this conversation. I wouldn't have changed anything about what we just did. And guess what? I can't. Even if I wanted to, with all the money in the world. So I think, just to sort of like close the loop here, we're fed so much information.
Yeah.
And it's really overwhelming. I believe that certainly take in content, certainly listen to podcasts like yours that are talking about really interesting things. Like I'm sitting here with like this ketone IQ, the ketone shots, which I love, right? Like, do I need to use this stuff? No. Do I love to use it? Is it great for me? I love it. It gives me a little bit of a bump of energy. I've got this sort of like clean, fluid focus feeling when I use it. So I use it a couple of times a day, but this is not something that everybody has to use. There's way simpler ways to begin the path of change for you. Or, maybe you're not someone that needs to change, but take in the information, think about what you are currently doing, and don't stress yourself out about it, because you can only do really effectively one thing at a time. So, dude, this was such a great conversation, man. You know?
It's just cool when you just connect the dots and think back to, before we even knew each other, me going to your restaurants in New York, loving the meatball shop, getting to know about you, listening to your podcast, using Creatures of Habits. I think we got connected through Hinman initially, to you coming on the podcast, to me coming on your podcast too. Like, I don't know, just this amazing chain of events that just stem from you choosing to make a change and building something that society deems valuable, just like the doors that are open to you, the relationships that are open to you. Like, life really is amazing, dude. And it's like, I don't think it's a coincidence that we're sitting here and you're saying that almost 20 years ago, you'd overdosed on heroin. And now we're looking back on the amazing career that you've built, that you're still building with so much more to do. And now we're friends. And, I've built my business over the last couple of years and feel like I'm really living the life of my dreams. And I just feel like what we're doing is possible, and it's like a God-given right to anyone that just has that desire to change and just do something valuable with their life, man. Just gets me so motivated.
Me too, dude. Just that right there makes me want to run through walls. What you just said, we also got to get Noble Origin and Creatures of Habit together on a cool project.
That's coming.
Yeah, we got to do that. That would be a cool way to sort of like make it the third leg on the stool, right?
Yeah, I think more brands need to collaborate and work together, man. Like that kid Dane, my buddy, he uses the maple flavor every day, and then he mixes the Noble chocolate into it. It's like I just think more brands need to collaborate.
Maple chocolate, I got to try that.
Smart,
where can people follow along your journey?
Yeah, so Meat Mafia Podcast is, we've put out 300 plus episodes, all topics, health and wellness related. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Twitter is actually the platform that I use the most, where I put out all my quality thoughts. So it's just at Meat Mafia Brett. Instagram is the Meat Mafia Podcast, and then our nose to tail protein powder is nobleorigins.com.
Awesome, man. You're a legend, and it's awesome to have built this relationship, and I know it's just the beginning.
Yes.
I got to get back down to Austin and hang with you guys again, and we'll figure out this little partnership collaboration. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, we'd love that, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being on. All right, y'all. Another one in the books. What a great convo. If you do not listen to the Meat Mafia podcast, you certainly should do that now. It's a great podcast. There's been a plethora of amazing guests on the podcast, myself included. 257. If you want to check out that episode, you should do that now. So we'll have all those down in the show notes. Noble Origins, Meat Mafia Podcast. We'll have those down there in show notes for you. I can't thank you guys enough for listening in and tuning into this podcast. I thank you every week because I genuinely mean it. I'm sitting here. I love doing this. This is like truly a passion project for me, this podcast. I think this, we're somewhere in the 150-ish arena of episodes with the Creatures of Habit Podcast. I will continue creating awesome content for you guys if you do me 3 favors. The first one is the most important. Share this podcast with a friend or a family member or someone you like, someone you don't like. Share it with people. Share it. Just literally copy the link and post it on your social media, or just text it to a couple of friends. That would really mean the world to me. That is how we keep this thing going. 2, if you're feeling super generous, a 5-star rating and a review would be unbelievable. Unbelievable. And then 3, tune in next week. Subscribe to the podcast. Hit the subscribe button because, I love doing this. And you guys are very, very loyal listeners. And if you're not subscribed, you should be. So other than that, y'all, I love you. I appreciate you. Until the next one, peace.